Hey guys, it's Chris. Today we are going to be talking about how to wire up a towed battery charger plus if you only have a 4-pin connector on your towed vehicle. This isn't going to be a super common situation. Most dealers will install a 6 or a 7-pin connector if they're installing a tow bar or a base plate for you. So this may not be something you ever run into, but there are instances where maybe you've been trailer towing or something of that nature for a long time, or maybe you just already had a 4-pin connector installed on your towed vehicle. Maybe you bought it used or something like that. There are situations where you'll run into having a 4-pin connector instead of a 6 or a 7-pin connector. And before we dive too deeply into this, we need to understand a bit about how our towed battery charger plus works. So if you get a chance, definitely check out our full how it works on the towed battery charger plus. That's going to give you a lot of great info that we're not necessarily going to cover here. But in general, what's happening with our towed battery charger plus is when you install it, it's really just acting like a gatekeeper. It's not supplementing voltage, it's not adding any voltage. What it's doing is it's taking the voltage that's present at your hot pin at the front of your 6 or 7-pin connector there, and it's running it up to the towed vehicle, and it's just, again, acting like a gatekeeper for that power as it's coming through. So the problem with a 4-pin connector scenario is that on your 4-pin connector, and it doesn't matter which 4-pin it is, you don't have a hot pin. 6 or 7-pin connectors do, a 4-pin is not going to have that. So this is a problem because that's how our towed battery charger plus is pulling voltage to your battery. So if you don't have that, you're a bit dead in the water. So right out of the box, our towed battery charger plus will not work with a 4-pin. However, there are ways we can modify things to get it to work with that situation. So what we basically need to do is create a makeshift umbilical. So on the towed battery charger plus, and you're not going to change a lot, you're going to wire it to the battery the same way you normally would. But instead of wiring the RV wires to your connector, you're just going to leave those as naked wires kind of down at the front of your towed vehicle. Then on our RV end of things, we actually have to bring a hot wire and a ground wire out because, again, those are not present in our 4-pin connector. So the best way to do this would be to splice a wire on your motorhome side. On your motorhome side, by the way, you should pretty much always have a 6 or a 7-pin connector. That really should never be any different. Pretty much every OEM on the planet will supply a motorhome with that 6 or 7-pin connector. So you should have that hot pin over on that side of things. So what you can do is splice a wire there and bring that wire out along with a ground wire. Again, you should have a ground pin there as well. So you'll bring those 2 wires out to where you have the naked wires of the towed battery charger plus. So we've kind of created a bridge there. Now, if for some reason you don't have a hot pin on a 6 or 7-pin connector at the back of your motorhome, you can run a direct wire from your motorhome's alternator and bring it back the same way. Again, you'll also need to bring a ground wire out, but you can do that as well. And for either one of these purposes, 14 to 16 gauge wire should be perfectly fine. So regardless of which situation you're in, we've now brought a hot wire and a ground wire from our motorhome out to meet our towed battery charger plus wiring. So we now have a hot and a ground wire on either side. So now we just need to find essentially a way to connect these two. So there's really 3 different ways of doing this. We can use the most simple form, which is some kind of a butt connector for both of these wires, and those are usually just, you may be familiar with them, but they're a little sheathing essentially that they're usually wrapped in heat shrink. You can just heat those up. They kind of conform to the wire, and the high-end ones, which is what we'd recommend using in these instances, have some solder inside as well, so it'll fuse those wires together. So again, this is the most simple way to do it. It's pretty straightforward. The problem with this method is that there's not a lot of mobility or versatility to it. You don't really have any easy way of disconnecting when you get where you're going. So that's going to be a big drawback to using butt connectors, but it is an option, and it's probably the simplest option. So the next option up would be to use something like a 2-pin connector like I've got right here. So in this scenario, again, we've got a little 2-pin connector. It's got a partner, a male and a female end here, and it's got a hot and it's got a negative or a ground. And so essentially what you would do is you would just take both of these and you would wire them to the respective wires on either side. So you could just solder these ends or however you want to attach them. We basically just need to make sure that these are fused to their wires on the RV side and on the towed vehicle side. Now, the big thing with this is that depending on which 2-pin connector you use, they may not be super waterproof. And that's a really important thing to note, is that in any of these situations, whatever connector you decide to go with, it really needs to be as waterproof as possible, because this plug will be exposed to the elements. It will be exposed to nature, and it needs to be protected because we're dealing with power. So not all of these 2-pin connectors are very waterproof or weatherproof. And you're also introducing another point of failure if you have a solder joint on both sides of these. So again, there's a lot of variables you're introducing here, and you just really need to do your research and take very good care when you're actually installing it to make sure A, your solder joints are secure, and that the actual connector itself you're using is waterproof. So that's important if you're going to use a 2-pin connector, but that would kind of be the next step up from a butt connector type connection. So then our final connector style that we could use here is like a marine connector, something that would be used in maybe a boating application or something like that. These are specifically designed to be waterproof and weatherproof. So they're a great option. They pretty much are all going to meet our standard as far as protecting this wiring from the elements. The drawback to these is that they are a bit more upfront work to install. It's not much, it's not crazy, but there is a little bit more work. You're gonna have to do some crimping, you're gonna have to do a little bit more installation to get this to be secure in these marine connectors, but they're very easy to unhook when you're getting to where you're going. And again, once you install them, you really don't have to touch them very much. So really, to be honest, this would probably be the method we'd recommend. But again, it is going to be a little bit more upfront work, so just make sure that you're ready for that if you choose to go this way. So again, any of these 3 methods of connection will work. They will make sure that your Tow Battery Charger Plus is now able to draw power from the motorhome's alternator, which is again, the biggest thing that we need to do. At the end of the day, that's all we're trying to do. So any of these 3 connection points will work. Again, just to hit all the highlights here, we need to essentially install the TBC Plus the same way, but leave the wiring exposed. We then need to bring a hot and a ground wire from your motorhome to meet that wiring. And then once we have those 2 sets of wires, we need to find some way to connect the 2 that's going to be weatherproof and waterproof and able to easily disconnect when we get where we're going. So if you've got any questions on any of these connection methods or anything else having to do with the Tow Battery Charger Plus, don't hesitate to reach out. We're available by phone, chat, or email. And in the meantime, happy RVing.